Okay, well, good evening, everyone. We are up to chapter 3, page 77 in A Blueprint of Enlightenment. And so we enter these pages with Dogen Zenji's, a translation of Dogen Zenji's Gakudo Yojinshu, Guidelines for Studying the Way. And Dogen points out that you would definitely, if you were going to do anything, you need to train in whatever it is you were going to do. And he uses a public figure as somebody who would need to train in order to take up, the guidance of a community, of a town, of a city. And so we surely would expect that kind of training. And so he says, well, of course you would do training in Zen practice also, even though enlightenment is already there. So it's a fairly short chapter, and but Dogen points out that when enlightenment is harmonized with training, you cannot step on even a single particle of dust. So should you be able to do so, you would be very far away from enlightenment itself, he says. And then if you return to your true self, you can transcend even the status of the Buddha. So we go from there, and the opening paragraph, then we see that Roshi often is concerned about death and about the impermanence of life. And so he talks about the 4 banners that are put up inside the hondo. The hondo has usually a section in the center of it that has 4 posts around it. And when there's some kind of big celebration or some kind of big ceremony, there are flags that are painted and put up on those posts. And so he tells us about those 4 that are put up for a funeral. All things are impermanent. This is the law of appearance and disappearance. Leaving the world of impermanence and reaching the world of nirvana. And the world of nirvana is peaceful and comfortable. And many teachers refer to death as nirvana, entering nirvana. There are different understandings of that and different approaches to that, but the training master that I worked with, Goto Roshi, always said, oh yes, so-and-so in my community just entered nirvana, meaning the person died. And so other teachers might say that nirvana is here, present now, and that our job is to realize nirvana at this time. So we go then to the very first one. He is talking about all things are impermanent. And we are going to see how important that simple statement is as we go through this book and as we read through. We already know that he has brought this up many times in this translation, in this commentary. And he refers, all things are impermanent, and it is maybe Dogen's most important teaching, and it is maybe the most important teaching also in Buddhism. So he says, all things are really like water flowing. He shows how things are moving. There is a constant movement in everything around us. And so because of that, this is also a help. I mean, we spoke about that the other day at Sesshin, that while impermanence can be very painful because we can't hold on to those we love, it's also a great mercy and that if we didn't have impermanence at all, that would be a great suffering in itself. So he comes then to the top of page 79, which comes back to this importance of how we see. And he explains it really, really well. And he's going to come back again and again because it's going to be the essential point that is necessary for realization. So at the top of 79, seeing happens because of your intention. Seeing happens not because of your intention to see. That is to say, you are sitting down in your chair. We've closed our eyes to sit meditation, this few moments that we did. And when you opened your eyes, seeing occurred. You did not intend to see anything. You didn't have to intend, but there it is. Seeing happens. The eye is certainly made to see things when it's open. And therefore, there is no real viewpoint of the self or me within the act of seeing. My friends, I cannot stress this enough. This little few sentences is the key to all that he is talking about and that Dogen Zenji is talking about in Awakening. There is no real viewpoint of the self or me within the act of seeing. If you close your eyes right at this moment, you don't see anything. You have mind images, of course. But when you open your eyes, you don't intend to see, it's the eyes that see. And Dogen says, he's going to say a little bit later, if you entrust yourself to the inevitable movements of the six senses, entrust yourself to seeing, this is necessary. You will realize the way only after you do that. I cannot tell you how important this is. And we've been through this already in this book. Several times he has brought this up. And we spent quite a bit of time in chapter 1. And there is no more important point about the senses. And it is the same thing. When you hear something you don't intend to hear, it's just hearing occurs. So there is no self in between that. And that is true of all the senses. And the same thing is with the mind. This whole thing, even the mind, is organized right now in this way. If you observe yourself with such a mind, you will notice that there is no fixed viewpoint that is me. We almost don't need to go past this paragraph. There is no me in the act of seeing because the eyes are simply seeing. And this has to be realized. Dogen says, you will realize the way only after you do that. So how do we do that? How does that happen? We have to come to a great silence and sit with simply the eyes seeing and allow the eyes to see and rely upon that, but not upon me as a seeing person. we just see, because that's what the eyes do. The ears hear, the mouth tastes, food tastes. It's what the whole body does. And in this chapter that we are reading today, he is trying to get us to this point of the body as the fundamental awareness of awakening. There is no real viewpoint of the self or me within the act of seeing. Seeing occurs.
When I read this, I was reminded of all the different stories of the monks having their awakening with the sound of the pebble, or the simple sounds that are uncluttered, for lack of a better word. I mean, he talks about seeing, but the stories so often seem to be about sound.
Well, either seeing or sound are the easiest of the senses. It is what may more difficult with taste or even touch. But these two, because it is so obvious that the eyes are, I don't need to make myself see. I'm not even there in the action of it. If you close your eyes and then open them, you realize this, you're not there doing that. The eyes are doing that. And the same with hearing. We simply hear. The ears hear. And so these are the two easiest of the senses to be able to experience that realization. There are some other stories, of course, of the mind, the flag waving, and the monk saying, "Oh, it was my mind that was waving." So there are stories, but there are very few of them, as you say, Karen. It's more typical with sound that somebody will have a kensho, an awakening via sound. So we are sitting in zazen and we are facing the wall. And so there is no input of image except the wall. And the hearing is very acute during zazen. So if we are sitting in a deep and present way, maybe a bird will sing and we will suddenly awaken, or something will happen, or maybe even the movement of somebody else in the zendo might make that happen. But it's an act of pure grace and an act of pure gift for that to occur. And yet it also occurs because, as Roshi is pointing out, there's the need through constant training to place ourselves in the most excellent situation in which such a realization could occur. But seeing and hearing are the easiest. And that paragraph, my friends, is the most important paragraph so far in this book. Yeah.
It seems to me, putting aside our life experiences, so we just hear, for example, is really almost insurmountable. I mean, for example, we were talking about music last week and choice. Well, I will always prefer Mozart over Nine Inch Nails. I mean, that's my life history. That's how I seem to be wired. And so, while I appreciate sincere practice can move us closer to that point of just hearing, just seeing, it just seems, well, like our vows, almost impossible.
Well, who Who is listening when you hear Mozart?
In some respect, Mozart, Bach, I think the whole world is listening. But
Of course.
well, I am listening. I mean, I am perceiving that music. My body is responding to that music.
Of course. And as it should be. As it should be. But if there is an analyst who is listening or something like that, then that, that realization doesn't happen. But typically it is not, it wouldn't happen necessarily in the occasion of listening to Mozart. It is typically a moment that comes out of great silence that sort of interjects that silence and says, wow, something like that, but not in the occasion of really listening to, a Mozart symphony or any piece by Mozart. Mozart is present when we are certainly listening to Mozart. The whole world is coming alive with that. But typically it's a something that interjects and lands in the center of silence.
It seems as if, oh, go ahead. Sorry, Larry.
I just want to add, there have been times where I have found myself listening to a classical music piece fresh, just trying to be totally present. And it does sound different.
Mm-hmm.
And it's as if I'm hearing it for the first time. It's wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. And, so we aren't talking particularly about that. But the question is, I hope we'll listen to Mozart, but the question is, in the course of the day, when we are going about our typical life, are we injecting I into the activity of the day? Or are we able to allow seeing to occur, allow hearing to occur, understanding that when we interject, when I is doing the seeing and I is doing the listening, then that's part of our own convenience. We are creating our own convenience. And that's a different thing that we are talking about.
Edo-san?
Yes, Karen is next for a moment.
Oh, okay.
I was just going to say that it seems as if while we gain a lot of benefit by creating a story about our lives, about what our our personal experiences have been, that hampers us in many ways. It's sort of paradoxical. We couldn't live without that, but it is hampering our actual seeing, maybe, or hearing, or these other functions. Because it seems as if I was listening to Mozart, for example, I would be listening to Mozart with all my previous listenings of Mozart, my acculturation of appreciation of that particular genre of music. I'd be bringing my whole experience to that, and it would be it would be difficult to let that fall away, to just hear Mozart without all that background.
And that is perfectly fine to do. And we bring the entire life of appreciation to that moment of listening to Mozart. And that's really not what we're talking about. Talking about something so simple and difficult that once realized cannot be taken away from you. It just can't be. And that one sees the variations of consciousness that we are able to bring to the course of a day. And that particular consciousness is something particular that we are talking about. That realization is particular. Yes, Bob.
I've been thinking somewhere along the line, it was asked, what is the function of the self? And I'm thinking from a developmental point of view, the self is something that is created as we grow up and mature as part of a society. And I mean, that self, the functioning of the self is to create, it creates suffering. The self is suffering to a large extent. And in response to this suffering, some of us come to practice. And it seems that the self is what we practice with, in a way. And I don't know if it involves a dialogue with the self, or but recognizing it, recognizing the activity of selfing, I guess. And I don't know. Is that what they're getting at with this chapter?
Well, I think Gian Roshi is attempting to help us understand that the self is emptiness itself, and that the suffering self is the egoistic self,
Yes.
the relative self, and that he's asking us to take a step into emptiness.
And that would be that is our practice, essentially, is taking that step.
Correct.
Recognizing the self for what the self is.
Right. So in this important thing that he is saying, that in this simple action of seeing, where he says, when we open your eyes, you see without any intention, the eyes just function in this way. There is no real viewpoint of the self or me within what the eyes do.
Yes.
So if you can realize that, you won't have any further question about the self versus emptiness. You can't, I mean, I can't just say the sentence. You have to sit with that.
Yes.
And allow that to happen.
And I guess recognize when I'm caught.
Have to look so deeply into what he means when he says the eyes have no me in them. So in your practice, you have to sit looking at the wall and work with your eyes and be present to simply what seeing is, and that there is no me in what the eyes do. I don't make myself see. The eyes simply see.
Mm-hmm.
If we are lucky and we are not blinded with some illness.
Blinded by the self.
Well, yeah, the small s, yeah. So this has to be worked at, and it is so simple, utterly simple, that we have to let go of all the other stuff that is crowding in and simply see.
Ada-san?
Yes.
I think I heard everybody, Larry, Karen, and Bob say explain a version of, the saying that there is no me and there or you, but there is only my conditioning and your conditioning.
Mm-hmm.
And Larry, you mentioned it almost right off the bat when you said that it's part of your life history how you came to appreciate Mozart. And I immediately thought, oh well, that's maybe I don't appreciate Mozart because I'm conditioned somehow not to. But it's a great question. Why? And I don't know how it applies to our preferences. Surely you're not expected to appreciate Nine Inch Nails like you appreciate Mozart. I hope not. And the seeing portion reminded me of something that Alan Watts used to say, which is, what about those rods and cones in your eyes? Are you operating those? What about the cochlea and the auditory nerve? Is that something you're doing?
That's good. Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm sort of going more there, where there's something about us that's there, irrespective of our preferences and our conditioning.
Well, he's going to get to that further on in the chapter, in which he's asking us to rely upon those on the body functioning by itself without interference of my preference or my, at my convenience, as he says. So that is how the body functions. It just works that way. What, Jerry? You have to turn your speaker off. You unmute.
Mute. Have to unmute.
Yeah.
I wanted to follow up this in physical one. He says, by understanding this body using concepts, we started to think my body moves at some point when we were children. So we begin to build up a narrative, as Karen said, of who we are. I think, though I think this will be discussed, this will be confirmed experimentally, that this starts before you're born. I think it's built in. And so you build up a narrative of who you are. And one of the things this narrative does is it says, I'm the person that likes this, I'm the person that doesn't like that. So you pick and choose as fundamental to this narrative that you built. And but that narrative can stop. It can be just cut off. And at that point, you just see. So that's another aspect of the same thing, I think.
Yes.
And I wanted to mention it particularly because of what Karen said.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, of course we have these appreciations of life that we have experienced. Of course we do. And I don't think Roshi is saying that that shouldn't continue, or that we don't have those. But have we satisfied ourselves completely in understanding the true self? And that's what he's after. Are you satisfied? Dogen Zenji was not satisfied, and that's what took him on his great voyage to China, as we find out, as we read later. And that satisfaction of something is a realization of the true self. And that's all the true self, just to realize that I am not the one who makes my eyes see. It's just huge. Huge.
Yeah.
So I'm just thinking what you said early on here about we have to come to a great silence. And I guess what I thought of at the time, or what I'm continuing to think about, is that silence doesn't necessarily mean the absence of auditory input,
Mm-hmm.
or vibrations that our ears perceive and we perceive as sound or noise. And I guess just going to Amir's point, Larry, can you hear or can you listen to Nine Inch Nails in the same way that you listen to Mozart?
Brian, just a second, it's a little bit mumbled, your speech. So could you just repeat the last two sentences?
I was saying, can you listen to Nine Inch Nails in the same way that you listen to Mozart? To be open to that hearing without the preference. I guess I think of it in terms of like if I'm when I'm sitting zazen and there are noises, the garbage truck comes by, or somebody is parks out in front of the house with the the deep bass boom boom boom, and I can have a preference and I can get caught up in that and just find myself getting tense and irritated, or I can just let the sound be the sound.
Correct. I mean, in zazen, we are present to everything. So we are doing very deep listening. Zazen is also about deep listening to the world around us, not to name what we hear particularly, but to allow. I mean, the great word allow in zazen is really what we do. We allow life to be, allow ourselves we allow giving up ourselves in order to be zazen.
Mm-hmm. And I guess I've had the experience of being in silence in the midst of what could be disruptive or disturbing noises, because it's just passes through.
Right.
Without a trace, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
As our thoughts do in zazen, they pass through without having to capture them. And we know that even if we do capture them, by the time we get up from the cushion, there's nothing to grab from them anyway. They are gone. They're absolutely over and gone. I mean, zazen has no content in that sense. I mean,
that one's a little more difficult.
Yeah. But this morning, was it this morning that we heard the geese? Was that today?
I couldn't hear it.
I'm looking at Larry and Mickey and Alice.
Yesterday I think we heard more. We heard some this morning, but we heard a lot more action yesterday.
Okay, I mean, so in the middle of zazen, we get the geese are out and they're screaming and yelling, and there's some fight going on with the geese out on the lake. Well, of course we knew that was what it was, but there was nothing we could do about it, and just hearing took place. But we certainly could identify it, and we could say, yeah, we came out later and we said, boy, the geese really did something this morning. And so we all recognize that because we're awake and alive, and we know that was happening. But there wasn't an I involved in it. It was just that. It was just that itself. But because it was very noticeable in the middle of zazen, we remembered that happened. So, but very often zazen goes on, we hear everything, and yet we don't try to corral it, or we don't try to grasp it, or to make big notes of it. Or we don't get together and talk about what happened in your zazen. I mean, nothing happened. Essentially, nothing happened.
And if I understand what Gian, what she's saying here, that's the point to which we're trying to get with all of our six senses, right?
To allow ourselves to be, yes, to be beingness with all of the senses. I mean, this is very, very difficult with taste. You know, we know the taste of things, so it isn't as though I'm going to eat a stalk of asparagus and eat asparagus for the first time. And yet that is, you know, what the aim of practice or life is, that once something is new constantly. I mean, that is, that's the Buddha, that it is, we do everything for the first time. What?
So I have a question. So you heard the geese, and I can imagine in that situation, I'm sure it's happened to me, that I hear the geese and then a mental image of geese I have known arises. A scene of geese in a field, or the geese on that very pond. And that's the arising of mind. Yes?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Just, yeah, that was, that just came up. It just happened. Happening.
Yeah. Karen, I had the same thoughts, and reflecting a little bit on the next paragraph where he writes of just observing a game of chess or a game of Go, you know, dispassionately. And I realize when I'm sitting in the Zendo, often we will hear a weed blower or a chainsaw or dog barking. And I find I'm able to just hear those sounds without any additional thought. Whereas if I hear the geese or I hear a bird, I just can't help but start to process. You know, what is that bird doing? You know, first I have to identify the species, but it's very different. And it's really quite wonderful when I can just hear that dog bark and hear that weed whacker going, and it just comes and goes.
Yeah. But these identifiers, I mean, I thought about you this morning, Larry. There were certain birds, and I was wondering, forgive me for this, but I wonder if Larry identifies those birds when they're singing.
I confess, it's academic training. What can I say?
Sure. But the thing is, that happens so absolutely quickly that I mean, it is your training to be able to do that. The question is whether you sit there and think, oh, that bird, that kind of bird, it's early for them to come in the spring and maybe they shouldn't be here yet. And I wonder if they're nesting. That shouldn't happen.
I'm working on it.
Oh, okay. But we have so many species of birds here. So you hear a bird, and if you are trained in that, it is almost impossible not to identify the bird as you hear it. The same as you identify a chainsaw. You do. Or you identify, a horse whinnying outside, or people going by on their bicycles. So that is natural. The problem is, do we chain something to that afterwards?
Exactly. And in the case, in my particular case, I think there's a great deal of ego attached to birds. As some of you may know, birding can be intensely competitive. I'm not a quote lister, and I stopped keeping my life list little decades ago. But I know people where it's just a very competitive sport, and ego is always present. And so I still carry some of that baggage in terms of, do I know this bird? But I'm getting better at it. Just letting go and just appreciating the beautiful sounds for what they are.
Right, and this is called practice, as we know. This is our practice and our training. But everybody's got something like that, Larry, that we are working with. That that we discover in the midst of our practice, in the midst of Zazen, that we have to deal with. So it's training. But he does talk about Go and about chess, and how we are able, if we are watching a Go game or a chess match, if we know the game, we can see better than the people who are actually playing, because we have no investment in whether to win or lose. And so, and of course, we have a Go player down here. Jason is a Dan. He's a ranked Go player. And Jason will probably tell us that as long as you want to win, you are going to lose at Go.
It's what he says is very true amongst beginners. Amongst beginners, you can get pulled, I think, pulled to your desire to win and lose. And it's very much a skill and training to detach oneself and find simply the best move. Detach oneself from the desire, because the more your emotion gets wrapped up, the less you'll see. And you need to be able to count to 120 about every move. Can you count to 120 when you're flustered? No, you can't do that. So that's a skill that the professionals, learn. And it's funny, it's ironic, amongst the professionals, they're pretty much the only ones who can see it. But it's because they train themselves to put that aside.
Sure. So this is what he is saying, that we have to train to be able to put these things
Yes.
so that we can quiet the mind enough so that we realize what the eyes see. The eyes simply see. So that's all about training, continual practice. So, the other interesting good business that he comes to in the bottom of 79, when he's talking about gain or loss, and then how we begin to suffer, and we take a fancy to something and we really like it, and then we get messed up and we suffer with that. And then it starts when everything's fine, and then somebody comes in and he says, you're really stupid. And you say, what? What are you calling me? What are you calling me something? What? And then all of a sudden, anger comes up. The ego has flourished. And what I loved about this, of course, we've all had this experience. You take that suffering to bed, and in the middle of the night, you're angry all by yourself. I mean, that was so good. You put your thoughts in the center, and then it's only a matter of your own thoughts fighting. No one knows about this except you. You are the only one who knows and suffers. I mean, we all know this, don't we? We've all had those nights. And I think the Buddha talks about not, the food that has gone bad in the refrigerator, you throw it out. And it's something like that. The thoughts that have gone bad in the mind we should throw them out. So anybody remember that quote of Buddha and the food or the leftovers? I guess it's the leftover food that's gone bad. Maybe Mickey will remember that. No. Anyway, he says you don't eat the poisoned leftover foods, you throw it out. And that's exactly what those kinds of thoughts are, the leftover poison. So then we get down to the paragraph, then still on page 80. So exactly what we are saying, Buddha's practice is to throw away the self that is activated by the concept of me. There it is. Once again, another amazing life journey in Zen practice. Another sentence that is the whole of everything. Even if you throw away the self, your body won't disappear. So here he's going to start traveling in to the function of the body and the function of the six senses. So your body doesn't disappear. So we don't need to worry. We think that if we throw away the self, the body's going to disappear. We won't be able to function if we don't have the self. And he says, no. The body will continue. And yet we worry about the body getting lost somehow in this. And he says, only entrust yourself to the inevitable movements of the six senses and stop using them at your own convenience. So here we are again. He's comes at another angle, another facet to try and help us see how to relieve ourselves of the me that has built up over the history of which you've all expressed already, the me that I have myself have built up over the 80 years of, and Jerry says even before that, 9 months. I'm 80 years plus 9 months then. And so all that has built up over that time, to allow that to simply just lay that down for just a moment of realization. And that you will realize the way only after we do that, after we just lay everything down. And the mind is constantly tricking us, of course, into thinking that we have to have things, and we have to make our point, and we have to have our opinion. And right now we have such an opportunity to practice with the terrible opinions that are raging in our political discourse, and how difficult that is to not engage in opinion making when we know we're right, right? We all know we're right. I'm right, of course. Every single person here I know thinks they are right now about a particular political position. So well, this is a very difficult one that we engage in and talk about sometimes, because there are things in the world that are wrong. And we do have to be able to stand up and say something is wrong, and when something is also right. We have to have the courage to be able to do that. But we also carry a great deal of opinion along with that. And if we were able to listen to those who have a different feeling about things, we might be able to have some discourse. But Allison, speak a little bit about Ken Wilber's book that you have just read in this particular issue of opinion making.
Okay, well, I was going to ask a question related to the suffering that's caused by our opinions, especially in this situation that we find ourselves in. But yes, Mickey brought over a book that somebody donated to the library, and it's one of Ken Wilber's books. What is it? It's Trump and something about no truth, and that seems to be the world and the situation, the philosophical situation that we find ourselves in. We can't trust anything anymore. Nobody seems to be able to trust anything anymore. And then we have this war, the culture wars raging, and people just pitted against each other, the left and the right, the middle against the left middle and the right middle. And I mean, it's just, it's to the point where people can't hear each other anymore. And actually they're thinking in almost a different world. And so this book was interesting and helpful to me because Wilber is, if any of you have read Wilber, he's talking about developmental levels. And as there are developmental levels in, each person as they grow up, there are also in society and the peoples of the world and different cultures and groups within those cultures. So, and that's partly why people can't hear each other. And also, this is a time of great tension for a number of reasons, global warming and all of the other things that are happening, and the fears of people. And people tend to regress a little bit when they're fearful. And so they retreat a little bit into self-protection and protection of the ones that they love, and aren't able to see so clearly the big picture. And they become more untrusting. So I think what was helpful to me about reading this was, I have several family members who are in a different political camp, and I have gotten very frustrated with them, and wondering how could they even think such a thing? How could they believe such a thing? And this was a very calm way of looking at it. Well, of course they're at a different level, developmental stage, and why should I expect something different? And it's not that I can't have a discussion and disagree with them. They probably won't hear it. But the other thing is that I can be kind. I don't have to judge them. I don't have to call them names. And this can be very difficult. And it's still difficult for me. But I can pull myself back a little bit when I remember. And So that was just helpful to me, and I can't remember how this connects to what we're talking about.
It's about setting
that
up,
was helpful.
yeah, it's about setting up opinions,
Yeah.
and about how we are locked into our opinions right now. And, Gian Roshi is saying right here that you simply do it, but if you simply do not set up opinions, you can go straight to the essence of Buddhism, leaping over those difficult ways. And, in Fukan Zazengi, Dogen Zenji is saying that the way is perfect and all pervading. And so we get to the body then. The body is made up of the way itself. So the opinions right now, I was saying that it's a difficult time, but we have such opportunity to practice, because many of us are, filled with opinions. And so it's a difficult time and an excellent time for us to understand how opinion is roiling in us. And that roiling is itself a kind of poison then that keeps us from being able to see how the mind is working. So
the question I have is, how do we determine when we see something that seems to be is causing a lot of suffering, the action of certain people, of anyone around us. Is it opinion? How do I determine what is opinion and what is just simply wrong? You know what I'm saying? How can I thinking is one of the functions that we have, one of our natural functions. And seeing some of the things that are happening now, I feel this urgency to act, but I don't know what to do.
Right.
And this is a particular kind of suffering right now for me, and I think for a lot of us. And I'm trying to relate what we're reading right now to that, to help understand that and deal with it. And part of it is my opinion. I know if I'm judgmental of other people. But then, as you say, we need at times to stand up to what is clearly wrong.
Yes.
So
this takes great discernment and great practice to be able to see deeply into ourselves and to try and to discern what if there is something wrong, and if there is something that I personally or this person could do about it.
Right.
And if not, then our practice must be to not allow opinion to erode daily life.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's all he's saying. Simply, work with don't set up opinions. I mean, once we have opinions, if our practice isn't keen enough, then we don't see the opinion which is sitting in front of us, or the way we are acting from the point of opinion. And so to really understand how the mind is working to undermine our own clarity, because it certainly will do that. So that's all. We've just got a tremendous challenge right now at this time because of that. I read the newspaper and so forth. I read opinion columns and so forth. We're reading opinion, we're listening to opinion. And so it's such a time. It's such a time. But, naturally fall into a world that was made without your awareness, and you will realize your true self and life. This is difficult. In Buddhist practice, by throwing away everything, you will naturally fall into a world that was made without your awareness, and you will realize your true self and life. And I feel that even though we come to this realization, it doesn't mean that we abandon a world that needs to be made better. Of course, the world is made better by our own clear ability to see past our own narrowness. And so the body, here we are with the body. In the same way that he is saying that if you want to be the Buddha, don't try to make yourself into the Buddha. Don't think about becoming a Buddha or not becoming one. And I think it's a similar sort of thing. If we are to realize that there is something for us to do in the world, then a little bit we have to stand back and not think that, oh, I must do something about this, or I must act in the world in some way. It's to stand back and allow realization to occur. And then if there is something to do, we will be moved. That may sound very, idealistic, but it's what our practice is about. And he is telling us to stay as we are. up on the top of page 82. Don't think about becoming a Buddha or not becoming a Buddha, or whether you are a Buddha or not a Buddha. Just don't think about that. He says, drive away everything and just stay as you are. And then notice that, oh, this is the way it is. In Zazen, you are not supposed to do some special training. It is enough just to throw away everything you are carrying. Throw away the baggage. Don't eat the leftover poisoned food. Don't attach any good or bad to whatever happens. This is very difficult. And here I am saying that we do know what is right and what is wrong. But let go of the thought that we have to do something about it. Unless you know clearly that you must do something, then it's useless to carry around a worry about whether there is something to be done. I mean, all we can do is to hold practice together here and to keep Olympia Zen Center open. I'm talking to Allison specifically at the moment. All we can do. We know how hard we work every day. And people come and it looks so simple, as though, oh my goodness, everything is, nothing to do. It's all so clear and simple. And people have no idea of how hard we work to make it that way. And the maintenance that we have to do to take care of everything. But really, there's nothing special about it. It's just what we do.
Edo-san, I'm reminded of in the Zen Peacemaker Order, the second tenet is to bear witness.
Yeah.
And I'm reminded that if one were to bear witness over weeks of your and Allison's work, just as a fly on the wall, that would become evident to us that it takes a lot of work.
Yeah.
But it really requires dropping into your situation, your setting, to see that.
Right. Well, Allison and I have talked about that because sometimes, people think, oh, we don't do anything. Many times people have come to my apartment and they hear silence, so they think I must be sleeping. They must think that I sleep all day. Allison did that even this morning with me. So hardly ever do I get a nap, hardly ever. And we were talking about that the other day, is that someday we thought we should write down everything we do, but we don't have time to do that. So, it's just so everything. I don't know how we got into that especially, but stay as you are is what we were talking about. And just that's the way it is. You're not supposed to do some special training. It's just enough to throw away everything you are carrying, to throw away. Don't attach any good or bad. When you throw away fully, you will notice it regardless of what you are doing. By practicing in this way, you should have a clear response. And typically, we do what we do, and then we throw away the idea that we did it. That's what we attempt, I think, is to just make it all clear, and then it's just done. And then we don't think about it, whether I was doing it or, the I was present in doing it. It's just doing, and that's what our practice is. So.
Can I say one more thing?
Of course.
When I'm reminded of when we read this, these paragraphs, and then what we were just discussing is, how the eye sees and we don't intend to see, and the body moves often very naturally, and we don't have to think about doing it. And so this reminds me of the Cultivating the Empty Field. And is it Wanshi Shogaku? Yes. so many of the things that he says in there, in that book, are about just the natural functioning without a self directing it and managing it. And that's one of my favorite books, and it's because of that. And it's something I guess I aspire to. So to allow that to happen.
But look at what already occurs in the morning. We sit zazen, and then the bell rings, and we do the robe chant, and we put on the robe. And then we prepare for ceremony. And everybody just goes about preparing for ceremony. And there's nobody involved in that except we make it happen. It's really incredible. And practice is intended to be that kind of dance, that kind of orchestra, that kind of harmony, that we simply do the action of practice. You know, somebody lights the candles, somebody rings the bell, somebody gets ready. It's just what we do. And there's no person involved in that except this body of practice. So it's already happening. There's nothing to think about. The body is trained to do that. In my own training, we were not permitted to write anything down. We could not. So, you know, Roshi would say, okay, you ring the bell this in this particular rhythm. We were not permitted to write it down. The body was what was in training. The body was trained to do the action of practice so that we would not have to think about what was next. The body would know how to do. And so I can really appreciate Roshi's talk about the body, because that is really what our training is about. More than anything, we train the body to sit. I mean, zazen is, you know, when you came to practice first, how long it took you to settle in with your legs and your hands and your arms and the eyes and all of these parts of the body that were being trained to be able to sit. And so this is what it is about. It's about the body and being able to operate with the senses, simply being the harmony of existence. Okay, my friends, it's just about time. So at the bottom, next time we're going to continue from the bottom of 82 up until 86, the top of 86. There is no way to go fast with any of this. So that's just a couple of pages, about 1, 2, 3 and a half pages, which is just about the monastic rhythm. Although the monastic rhythm's even a little bit slower than 3.5 pages. So, yeah, I'd like to be able to take up the story of Dogen going to China and hold that as a single piece. So that's what we'll do. We'll go from the bottom of 82 to the very first paragraph on 86. So just to finish and to just reiterate this, then at the bottom of the paragraph we've been reading, it says, Dogen, you don't know how to do it. You don't know how it's possible for the mind to be peaceful. Dogen Zenji has clearly taught us that we are in such a condition and how to practice in the midst of delusion. No matter what happens, leave the movement of this body as it is, without interfering with it, and learn only from it. So put that in the hopper also. That's a big underline of that one. So he's moving us in that direction of the body as the operative, all on its own. Via training, we just know how to do. We just do. It isn't even that we know, but the body is trained to go. It's like a child walking. Okay, all right. Anybody have any questions first? Beings are numberless, I vow to save them. Illusions are inexhaustible, I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless, I vow to enter them. Buddha's way is unsurpassed, I vow to become it. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you, Ado-san.